This episode of Destructoid is brought to you by Gamefly. Coming up on Destructoid, we reckon with the lore of Kingdoms of Amalur. Reckoning. Find out what we made of the game right now.
Welcome to Destructoid. I'm Terralon.
And I'm Max Scoville.
And this is a very exciting day, is it not, Max?
It's an exciting day.
We have not one, but two reviews for you guys today. Actually, our first reviews of 2012. This is hopefully going to be something that we're doing more of as the year progresses.
Yep.
And there's a lot of exciting titles coming out. But today we're here to talk about Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning. Now, given that this game came out less than 3 months after Skyrim, it's inevitable that people are going to compare the two. And while I think they are similar in theories, you know, they're both open world RPGs, each offers players two very different things, in my opinion. Now, before we go any further, it should be noted that this is a very long game, like Skyrim. Between this and our Darkness 2 review, which is also coming out today, we were only able to get about 15 hours in with the game, which is enough to get our first impressions, which we wanted to share with you guys. So, you want to start them off with a little background of the story?
Yeah, we don't claim to be experts exactly on this because 15 hours is not the whole game, but if you can't figure out what a game's about in 15 hours, then you know, I don't know if anyone can.
Chances are, if you don't like it by then, you probably won't like the game.
Right. So Kingdoms of Amalur is centered around the fact that your character has returned from the dead, and in doing so has altered the threads of fate, and everyone in the world of Amalur has basically accepted that their fate is a static, definite thing, and that nobody seems too upset by that. But then you come along, and everything changes, and then there's also some jazz going on about this wizard named Gadflo who's waging war on everyone else. It's a very typical kind of fantasy situation. The lore of Amalur has been created by prolific fantasy author RA Salvatore and illustrated by comic book artist Todd McFarlane. Personally, I've never gotten any of RA Salvatore's books, and if the whimsical realm of Amalur is any indication, I probably wouldn't like them. Meanwhile, I've enjoyed Todd McFarlane's work on comics like Spawn and Spider-Man, but I've always thought his occasional forays into fantasy artwork have been hideous. That being said, there are lots of people who are into heavy fantasy lore and super colorful, ornate, whimsical fantasy designs, and if they think Amalur looks and sounds cool, they will probably be into it. I was told in an interview that Salvatore wrote a 10,000-year history of Amalur, and that's very impressive, but from a storytelling perspective, the game is quite heavy-handed. Major plot points are explained in cutscenes, and everything else is sort of gleaned through a boring dialogue system. Forgettable characters loosely mouth their lines while your character stands there staring at them blankly.
Yeah.
There's some variety in the characters in terms of appearance, but the writing and dialogue is all pretty hokey.
Yeah.
Aside from being a really boring way to deliver a narrative, talking to NPCs is where I saw the majority of bugs while playing. It's a pretty stable game for the most part, but occasionally you'll be having a conversation with a guy and then there'll just be some random guard standing in front of you, or a curtain in the way or something.
I got a lot of overlapping text on the screen because I turned the subtitles on, and it puts it in the same spot as every other text.
Yeah, it's kind of a silly system, and at the same time, the dialogue options are sometimes displayed in a wheel format, like in Mass Effect, and other times they're just a list, which is I don't really know what was going on there. Basically, the only nice thing I have to say about talking to people in this game is that all of the dialogue is skippable, and that prolific voice actor Jim Cummings does a lot of the NPC voices. So there are times when you can pretend you're talking to Darkwing Duck or Pete from Goof Troop. So there's that.
Fun. I have to say, I'm not huge on lore to begin with, and no disrespect to R.A. Salvatore, but the story in this game did not interest me one bit. Unlike other RPGs, I felt like the conversations actually kind of pulled you out of the game, and after a while, I just found myself wanting to skip past them in favor of just running around and exploring the environment, which is really the fun part. The voice acting is not great, like you said. The audio and video, for me a lot, often didn't sync up in talking cutscenes, which was strange. And the characters and everything else up close honestly make it look like a 2007 game, which is a little disheartening because I was actually surprised by how beautiful the rest of the game is. It's just that you don't really notice it until you get out into the bigger open areas where everything's got this kind of cool, whimsical overlay that I'm guessing you are probably not a huge fan of, but I actually thought was really cool because it makes you feel like you're living in a magic mushroom or something.
Yeah.
Not those kinds of mushrooms.
Some of that girly fantasy.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, where the storytelling falls short, the combat is there to pick things right back up. So those of you who complained about the combat in Skyrim should find solace in this game. Basically, to give you a quick breakdown, you press X to attack, and then you can pull the right trigger and use one of 4 special abilities that you've mapped to the controller's buttons. Apart from that, though, A is what you'll use to sprint. You can dodge with B, or you can left trigger B to perform a special dodge. The enemy difficulty manages to feel balanced without ever feeling unfair, although if you are not prepared, boss fights can kick your ass. Speaking of boss fights, I thought the boss fights were the absolute best part of the game. The camera naturally zooms out and turns around when you're fighting, and then this epic music starts playing, and that's when you know shit is going down. But luckily for you, you've got the power of the reckoning at your side. So basically, when you fill up your purple fate meter there by destroying enemies and mixing up your combat moves, you can eventually pull both the left and right trigger at the same time and go into reckoning mode, which temporarily slows down time and your opponents and gives you a huge boost to your damage. So basically, if you're getting mobbed by guys, that's what you're going to want to do. It also is useful during one of my favorite parts of the combat. So at the end of a big boss, you can press A to trigger a special finishing move, and then a random button will pop up, and depending on how fast and how many times you press the button, you can get anywhere from 25% up to double XP for one kill. So what I found was cool to do in the game is to combine that with this potion called the Minor Experience Booster. And when you do that, you can get up to like 10,000 XP on certain kills, which is insane. It'll just like bump you up right a level. Yeah, so a lot of good stuff, I think, in the combat.
Yeah, the bosses were cool. A lot of the enemies look really great. I do like them, in spite of all the whimsical night elves and
they're
magic
some creepy.
tree people and
There's
shit.
some scary ass enemies. There's like a cockroach thing in there that's like, oh.
And worm slugs throwing up each other, stuff like that. So in addition to wielding various melee weapons, archery is also an option. Enemies are automatically targeted for you, and you have a quiver of 8 arrows. You can use all of them in a row, and then there's a brief reload period, but otherwise you've got an unlimited supply of arrows. Like with other weapons, you can hold down the attack button to charge up your attack, or, you know, like draw your bow harder, whichever. In terms of gameplay in a more general sense, one of my big problems with Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning is that it was pitched as an open-world game. According to some people's definitions, that might be true, but this game felt extremely rigid to me. The map is massive and has plenty to explore, but there are limited ways in which you can explore it. Each kingdom is broken up into smaller areas, which are all separated by little entrance tunnels or little pathways to each other. There are areas where you're just not supposed to be at a certain level, and these are populated with enemies who are much stronger than you, and they will kill you and let you know that you're not supposed to be there yet, which kind of doesn't really feel open world to me.
Yeah, it's very restrictive in the sense that you can't even jump whenever you want. You can only jump if you go to a specific ledge, and it offers you the option to press A and jump. So actually, if you're on a mountain, you can't just jump off. You have to find this specific path down.
Hell, if you're at the top of a stairway, you can't jump off the balcony. You have to go down the stairs.
It's
very silly. However, it is a big world, and the map system is solid. Fast travel is an option, and in some instances, a necessity. One very smart addition is that when hovering over a location with the cursor, you're given a list of services available there, which is handy if you just need to go to the nearest shopkeeper or healer.
I thought that was great, actually.
That's a great system.
Super useful.
That is taking a very standard, trope from action RPGs and improving it, which is cool. I like that.
Yeah. Now, as far as character customization goes, it's surprisingly detailed, actually. Those of you who like to play these kinds of games as hot females will be happy to know that it is possible to create a character that looks like Scarlett Johansson, as I did. She's pretty saucy, ain't she? Now, you've got 4 races to choose from, each with bonus points for certain stats, and a patron, which you also choose, which grants you some additional bonus stats, like plus 5% mana or something. Conversely, you can choose to take none of the patrons and just receive a 1% XP bonus instead. On top of those perks, about an hour into the game, the storyline forces you to choose a destiny from a set of cards that look like tarot cards, I guess, which is basically serving as your class system. So you've got options like rogue, brawler, soldier. Instead of being set in stone, though, you're given the opportunity to change your destiny each time you level up, and this is what eventually weaves your fate together. I initially chose a stealthy character, but then realized as the game went on that I'd rather play more of a warrior-type role. So not only does the game allow you to make those kinds of changes, it actually encourages you to experiment with different specialties and weapons. Speaking of weapons, my favorite ones were the chakrams, which is like Chinese throwing stars on crack. They're great for both ranged and melee combat. And another one that I really enjoyed was the hammer, if only for the fact that it was like twice the size of my character's body, and you can just go like that and just hit a whole bunch of people in a row with it.
Not really
awesome.
going for realism there.
Yeah.
Apparently Tara and I picked the same character type. I too was a stealthy Ducklefar chick with really big cans, and as I got into the game more, I also focused on being a more aggressive warrior type. I had some great results with attacking with daggers and Feyblades, though. Feyblades are like double-ended daggers.
Yeah, those are fun.
Yeah. Of course, the amount of fun you have with a particular type of weapon has a lot to do with how effective that weapon is, and how effective a weapon is obviously depends on how many points you put into it in the skill tree when you level up. One thing that should be addressed is that the menu system in this game is crap. It is ugly and clunky and something that I'm embarrassed to be looking at in the year 2012. It is frustrating to navigate, and it detracts from any other elements of the game that are actually pleasing to the eye. And considering that a large portion of this game is spent dealing with various menus, that is a real shame. So I don't know what was going on here. Anyway, back to the subject of stats and skill trees. In just about any town, you can visit a Fate Weaver and redistribute your skill points for a small fee, like a reroll. This is great if you want to change horses midstream and try playing as a different class, but it can also render some of your inventory unusable because all of a sudden you aren't good enough at sorcery or you're too weak. It also requires you to completely alter your playstyle. Now, it's a neat idea, but in practice, it didn't really feel like the rest of the game made too many accommodations for unbinding your fate. It felt more akin to changing values in a magical debug menu than it did to actually altering the threads of fate. I can imagine it being frustrating to novice players to suddenly have everything change on you, and it seems like serious players would rather just commit to playing as one class than re-rolling halfway through. Parts of Amalur incorporate streamlined improvements of familiar action RPG elements, like combat, for instance, or the map, while others just seem kind of phoned in, like the hideous menu or these stupid dialogue trees.
I can't really speak to re-rolling your fate or anything, because I stuck with my character the whole way through, but I will agree, the menu system is total crap. Very reminiscent of Oblivion, oddly enough, and generally frustrating to navigate. In fact, a lot of aspects of the game were kind of hit or miss for me. It took about really 10 hours before I actually got into the game, and it takes about that long, I think, to really get good at a lot of the crafting stuff. Because a lot of them, like blacksmithing and harvesting and sagecraft, they all develop really slowly because you have to invest skill points to get anything out of them. But when you finally do, you'll see that the best weapons of the game can only be gotten through crafting, which is what I found. Like, you find weapons around and they're good, but the first time I crafted my own weapon, it was better than anything I'd used in the game. And as a bonus, you can custom name your weapons and armor to anything you want.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, so Jim Sterling was saying on Twitter that he was walking around with like anus armor or something, which I thought was really funny.
Oh, Jim Sterling.
I made a Punisher hammer, which was kind of cool.
I had one called the Dongles.
Oh, wow.
It was some daggers called the Dongles.
Nice.
Yeah, that's how
Bet you like
serious we are
swinging
about
those around.
RPG.
So as far as side mechanisms go, lockpicking is one that took some getting used to. I kind of hated it at first because it seems very trial and error, but you get better at it as time goes on, I think. Something I did not get better with over time was dispelling chests, which is basically they have a bunch of chests around, and it's this mini game. Totally pointless and tacked on. Why couldn't you have just done lockpicking for all the chests? I don't understand.
Honestly, I feel like both of those mechanics, it's like if you're gonna do them well. And at this point, it looks like the lockpicking mechanism in like a browser game. It's stupid looking.
I thought that at first it grew on me, but dispelling was just dumb and really difficult.
Who is like, hey man, this game has lockpicking in it. You have to wiggle this thing and shove a thing over there, and it's exciting. And it's like,
Well, you can get better at it by adding skill points to these categories and making them easier. So if you hate lockpicking, you can just make them all super easy. But personally, I think those points are better spent elsewhere. Traits I do recommend investing in early on are the blacksmithing, of course, for weapons, and the detect hidden skill, which lets you place, it shows enemies up on your minimap. It also lets you discover hidden objects and eventually displays hidden passageways on your minimap that you can go into. So yeah, some of the exciting things that you can do with the game. I'm going to take a quick second to thank our sponsor, and then we'll be back with our final thoughts on the game.
Sounds good.
GameFly is the largest online video game rental service and offers you a choice from over 7,000 new and classic titles across all consoles and handhelds. With plans starting at just $15.95 a month, GameFly members can rent 1 to 4 games at a time and keep them for as long as they like. No late fees, no due dates, and shipping is always free. Once you're done playing a game, just send it back and GameFly will send you the next available game on your list. If you really like the game you're playing, simply click Keep It on the GameFly website and the game is yours at a discounted price. GameFly will even mail you the case and manuals free of charge. Destructoid fans get a free 15-day trial when they go to gamefly.com/Destructoid and sign up. Okay, so back to video games. What are your final thoughts on this? Because it seems like you're kind of conflicted here.
Okay, well for me, the bottom line with this game is that it's an extremely well-made game that I found totally unappealing. It was pitched as this epic collaboration between a famous game designer, a famous author, and a famous artist, and the end result is something that strikes me as totally unexceptional and underwhelming. However, that's more the fault of the marketing department than of the game designers. If you come at this game expecting an offline WoW with better graphics or a more in-depth Fable with a less of a sense of humor, you'll probably be pleased with the outcome. Amalur's combat is extremely tight, and personal tastes aside, the world is well crafted. Considering the size of the game, it's extremely stable. If you played the demo and it seemed like something you want to play for several dozen more hours, I highly recommend this game. However, if you heard the name Ken Rolston and open world in the same sentence and are expecting a new unofficial Elder Scrolls game, don't. You'll be horribly disappointed. Now, for the people who gripe that certain other open world action RPGs are broken games with crappy combat, here you go. Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning doesn't bring anything new to the table, but what it brings is a very competent contribution.
Yeah, I have to say, as disinterested in the story as I was, I understand that that is a completely subjective aspect, and a lot of people might find it fascinating if you really love lore or something. Even without the story and all the lore, though, I had a lot of fun with Amalur, much more than I was expecting to. I think the combat, without a doubt, is better than any other RPG I've played, and the extensive character development is enough to make me want to go back and keep playing it even after I've finished reviewing it. Which, sadly, I'm afraid is more than I can say for you, right? You don't plan on...
Not really.
Nah,
No.
Well, I'm excited to see where my character goes, and I know I can take her some places.
Yeah.
So I'm probably going to keep playing this one. But yeah, that's our Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning review. If you guys are interested in this game at all and you want to hear another perspective, you can check out Jim Sterling's written review, which is going up on Destructoid.com probably today or tomorrow sometime. I haven't seen his review yet, but based on his Twitter feed, it seems like he had an okay time with the game. He was talking about all the weapons and wanting to get bigger ones, so...
It's a good game.
There you go.
I just don't like it. There you go.
Well, let us know what you guys think of the game. If you, I don't know, maybe want to buy it day one or something, just let us know what you think. And as always, you can follow us on Twitter. The show is on there at twitter.com/DTOID show. Max and I are also on there. I am Tara Longest, and he is Max Scoville. Wearing his members-only jacket. Look at you, so cool today.
Stop making fun of me.
So watch out for our other review, which is going up today, which is going to be our Darkness 2 one, another exciting game that I'm happy to talk about. And we'll see you guys tomorrow.